It's time for To The Last Drop podcast with Liam Delcalm and Brendan Nell.
Hi there, Brendan. It's good to see you from a fair distance. I'm in Toulon and you are in Pretoria.
Toulon. Yeah, no, you're in a much nicer place at the moment than me. It's good. I'm glad you're there safely, Liam. And I can just imagine you've had quite the logistical nightmare getting all the way to Toulon and to the Springbok place.
I'm glad that's out of the way. I'm here now, and we might as well crack on and get into the show because we have to talk about the Springbok team announcement for their opening game. In today's show also, there's a little catch-up with Johann van Graan, a former Springbok assistant coach, who can tell us one or two things about the players that will be featuring in this World Cup. And then, of course, we'll look at the opening game and some of the games on the weekend, on the opening weekend of Rugby World Cup. But let's start with the Springbok team announcement. A couple of not mild surprises, but there were one or two interesting selections and some selections that were sort of forced or brought about because of injury.
Yeah, I mean, we all expected both Johann Klein and Canan Moodie to be somewhere in that match day 2023. The fact that they're not tells me they've both picked up niggles, and like the Springbok management has said for the last 6 years, is if they can't train on a Monday, they're probably not going to be considered. So I take it that's what more or less came out of those injury selections.
Yeah, in fact, Jacques Nienaber was pushed on that subject, and he said, a team like Scotland demand that your players that are only 100% fit. So in the case of Moody, he said he's 95% there. But I think the big thing is, couldn't take part in training, if you compare it to some of the other guys. So that basically precluded him from being selected.
If I look at that team, the things that just sort of jumped out for me was, and I'll just go through them quickly and we can chat about them. There's one, Damian Willems ahead of Willie, which I thought was an interesting, obviously on his Twickenham performance was a big part of that. The centre pairing I expected, although Andre Esthuizen must have rather pushed hard. I think they're going more for the combination there. Faf is 50th, obviously got him the nod to be there as well. The pack, Jasper, I thought was quite interesting, that he was ahead of Dwayne. I can only think they want Dwayne to come on with the bomb squad. And then Marco van Staden ahead of Quagga on the bench, which I thought was an interesting one as well. Did anything come out from the press conference or any reasoning?
The Damian Willems Willie Leroux dynamic wasn't really discussed. There were a few questions about Dwayne being on the bench and Jasper Wiese starting. Jacques kind of explained it away by saying, look, if it was the other way around, there would not have been any eyebrows raised. I did think it is interesting that in both cases there, in key positions, the selectors went with the young buck, Willems at fullback over Willie Leroux, and at eighth man they went with Jasper Wiese over Dwayne Vermeulen, which then also suggests that there is a bit of succession planning in all of this. Obviously, they also looked at the requirements needed for beating Scotland, but I think in terms of overall picture, that's probably what would have motivated some of their selections as well.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to actually come up with too many talking points for the squad at the moment. They're pretty settled. There's not real surprises, and it's not like we're going into massive shocks, like we've had in the past, the Springbok team. So, I pretty much looked at the squad tonight when I saw it, and then okay, fair enough. There wasn't much to say about it, and I think the big thing is, the Boks know. It's the old saying is they know how they want to play. They know what they're going to do. The opposition know what they're going to do as well. It's come and stop us. And it's a fairly simple recipe. I think the one thing that's interesting to me is the two scrum cap wingers, both probably the shortest wingers in the game. And I think a guy like Johann van Graan, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure he's going to try and use his power over them. And I think the Scotland will target the aerial game. But that's nothing new against the Springboks anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Duan, I mean, they would have had a pretty decent look at him as well when he played for the British and Irish Lions against them, and obviously they would have really studied him. So, as much as he brings that threat, the power game, the sort of speed over the first 10 or so meters, in the case of Cheslin Colby and Curtly Arons, I mean, they've got their virtues as well, and they're both very elusive runners and can wriggle their way out of tight corners. So, yeah, that dynamic is certainly going to be an interesting one. A very interesting one to watch on the weekend. But yeah, I think also at fly-off, where we have Mani Libbok up against a guy like an old fox like Finn Russell, that as well will be an interesting one. But more on that a bit later in the show.
Yeah, no, I think one other thing I sort of picked up from that, I wonder if they're not wanting Jasper to run at Finn. And use his sort of power. Not that Dwayne is a little bit of a different number 8.
He's more rangy there.
Yeah, whereas Jasper's very much I'll kick the door down. And so I thought that's the one thing. And I went and watched sort of highlight clips of the last time we played Scotland, and Pieter-Steph du Toit hounded Finn Russell in that game. Like you won't believe, and I can only think that's the exact same thing that they're going to want to do, and it's just cut off all his oxygen, because if he gets going, it could be a real threat.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you allow him a bit of a platform, the others feed off him. So yeah, if you shut him down, I think that's almost half the job done.
Yeah. And speaking of Finn Russell, we might as well handle it right now. I had a chat this morning with Johann van Graan, who the reason why I chatted to him, because he has now signed Finn Russell for Bath, where he's coaching at the moment, and has obviously coached against him in several teams. And I just asked him, you'll hear the conversation now of why exactly he is such a special player and the danger that he holds for the Springboks.
Firstly, is one of the best 10s in the world of rugby. He's got such an all-round game. I think the first thing is exceptionally good at his basics. His pass left to right to left is incredible. I think that is close to the best in the world. You've just got to look at his highlights package to look at the accuracy of his pass, the length of his pass, and the speed of his pass. The fact that he plays so close to the gain line, he stays on top of the defence, and he creates space for other players. And I think one of his biggest threats is if players moves off him, he's got a wide variety of skills to cut the line. Two things that he doesn't get so much credit for is his kicking game in his own half. Is incredibly solid to get, his own team out of his half, and then his defense is tough. He makes his tackles. Teams try and intimidate him. A lot of teams have gone after him, but he just always bounces back. And I think his personality, Brendan, he plays the game with a smile, and he's got big moments around him. So, I think for any team that's got to prepare against him, you've got to prepare well. I think one of the, most underrated things about the Springbok defence is the time and space they take away from opposition. Specifically, if you look, if South Africa concede a turnover, outside centre wing is incredibly high, meaning they take away space. So they might miss a few tackles, but they push the attack to the inside. And then another thing that's been really unspoken about South Africa is their jackling. And if you look right across their park is jacklers. So, yeah, they might miss a few, but they force the attack into positions that they don't want to be in. If you want to go around them, you're gonna risk the interception. And, even if they miss a few and they push them to the inside, you've got magnificent poachers on the inside. And, I think it's something New Zealand felt. One good example of it is the short kick off New Zealand kicked. They won it, and then Dwayne's poach. You might cut South Africa, but as you rightly said, their scramble and then their breakdown is phenomenal.
You're with Liam Delcalm and Brendan Nell on the To The Last Drop podcast.
Okay, so the World Cup opening match is almost upon us. This has been a much anticipated opening game. a really spicy one, a team that bossed this year's Rugby Championship in the South against the team that won the most recent Six Nations crown. On the one hand, a team that's won 3 World Cups in the case of New Zealand, and the other team that made it to 3 finals. What do you expect from this one, Brendan?
Oh, it's such a difficult one because I was asked by a couple of people over the last couple of days who's going to win that one, and my initial reaction would be that I reckon the All Blacks are going to bounce back from the Bok defeat, and there's going to be some sort of backlash. But saying that, both teams are so difficult to read at the moment. France must go into this game as favourites. Their hometown. I was reading a stat today that Antoine Dupont has captained them 12 times on French soil, never lost a game. There's so many things in their favour, but with that comes also the pressure of expectations. And we've seen French sides in the past, sort of disintegrate. So on that front, I mean, they must be favourites, and I think they probably should win. Except that I think this All Black team has taken a lot of flack the last couple of weeks, and there's been a lot of self-doubt. And I mean, even I saw Olivia Munn went and called them the worst All Black team ever at the World Cup. That's quite a stinging rebuke, and obviously would be played up heavily in the New Zealand media. So I think there's probably going to be some sort of passion and backlash from them. Whether it's enough is a good question. I'm not sure. If it isn't, both sides have got the luxury that they can go through, via the coming second in the pool. But still, this is a huge opening game, huge for bragging rights. I see both Dupont and Richie Mo'unga playing their 50th games for their sides as well. So there's so much on this game. It's too close to call for me, but. I don't know. Something tells me the All Blacks are going to be a lot better this time around.
I think there's no doubt that they will be better than they were in London. They were basically strangled out of that game. I mean, it was the Springbok pack was unrelenting. I'm not sure France, although they bring a big power game as well, but they've also lost a couple of significant players. I don't think they bring as big a power game in this particular contest. So it will be a little bit of room to maneuver for the All Blacks, but if France play with the control that they have shown for the last 2 years, especially when they've played at home, then they should win this one. The All Blacks will be better, but whether the improvements that they will make will be enough to shut down a pretty decent French team. You could almost make the argument, you spoke earlier about Olivia Munn saying it's the worst All Blacks team at a World Cup. You could almost make the case that this is the best French one at a Rugby World Cup.
Exactly. Now the thing to me is both these teams are exceptional off turnover ball. So that's going to be the interesting thing, and how the pressure tells on them and what they do when they get turnover ball. I think the Springboks are becoming that sort of team as well, in addition to their power game, is that if you do drop a ball and you do get a turnover, it's almost certainly points. So I think that's going to be the fascinating thing about Friday night. And of course, there's so much pressure. The world's eyes, it's the opening game. So much can happen. We could see cards. We could see all sorts of things. Either way, we're going to be entertained one way or another.
Yeah, I'm expecting a fairly spectacular game. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about teams not laying it out there. I think it's going to be a match that will fluctuate wildly in terms of the play, where the ball goes. There might be a little bit of kicking up front, but I think eventually both teams will yield to the attacking instincts, and I think it's going to be a rip-roaring contest.
Yeah, I must admit we're all looking forward to that one. I must admit. So, but yeah, I suppose from the beauty to the I don't know what's the word I can use, to the other end of the scale, where England take on Argentina, which I think is going to be a bit of a brutal game. I don't see it being the exhibition game that we might get on Friday night. Both sides, look, Argentina are great at taking you to the gutters, as Rossi loves to say. But England aren't in a good spot either. And I think if they're going to win, they're going to try and win ugly if they have to. So I don't think it's going to be the prettiest game out.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think Argentina with Michael Cheika as their mentor will probably have a fairly similar attitude. He wouldn't care much about, method or artistic impression in this one. I think it's just getting the job done. And I think he actually has the forces to pull this one off. And to be fair to Argentina, they've got a decent record against Northern Hemisphere opposition of late. So, if you really wanted me to stick my neck out on this one, I'll probably go Argentina.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I think is going to make it interesting, though, is the fact that there's no Owen Farrell. And I don't mean for the obvious reasons that people probably think I mean, but it's just that George Ford tends to get the backline going a lot easier. He's a much more subtle type fly half in his touches, whereas Owen Farrell's a lot more in your face. And I think that might help the England backline. I see there's also some talk of Marcus Smith maybe going to fullback or coming off the bench at fullback, which will give them another interesting option. But I think the big thing there is going to be discipline in the first to 60, because I think both sides have got this ability to give away cards, and especially when Thomas Lavanini is on the field, and we're going to it could be a very interesting game. That I think it's going to be an arm wrestle. It's not going to be a pretty game. Yeah,
Lavanini and he's gonna. If you think of Lavanini and Maro Itoje, I mean, I think there's going to be a bit of pulling, pushing, shoving, little off the ball sort of moments that try and sort of take focus away. So it's certainly going to be an interesting one. But I don't think I agree with you. It won't be one for the ages. This is certainly one to be very much fought in the trenches.
I mean, we obviously don't have time to go through all the games. There's a host of games this weekend, and a lot that we're going to obviously will determine where teams are starting to head. And next week we'll be able to talk a bit more about direction. But Pool D is a very interesting one for me, because both those games are very interesting from the viewpoint from the underdog. You have Wales playing Fiji, and you have Australia playing Georgia. And they're both very interesting games, because I think both Georgia and Fiji would give themselves more than a fair chance and more than normal in a tournament like this. And Australia is vulnerable. They've got a young team, and Wales, I think, would be having nightmares about facing any Pacific Island team in a World Cup, given their history. I'm not quite sure that either team will win, but I think it's going to be very interesting games as well to watch.
Mate, I'll give a fair whack of money to see Eddie Jones' face to hear a journalist say that, they're writing his team off against Georgia. Look, I mean, I think I think they will be tested in some areas, but I mean, I think the Wallabies really should win that one. And of course, give Eddie his first win. I mean, it's the old monkey or wallaby or whatever you want to call it will be off the back.
Well, I think the same sort of angst in Wales that I've picked up by reading the stuff that's coming out there is they really not sure where they are, because especially after Fiji beat England, I think they're a bit worried there. And Georgia beat them last year, so it might be Warren Gatland, but it's not the same Warren ball that we might see them try and win ugly as well. They've definitely got the players, but I think same as England, there's just not a lot of belief in that side at the moment.
It is interesting because if you look at the Wales team list, you kind of expect more. So there is something is just a miss there, and it's difficult to sort of put your finger on it because there's no doubt that they are underperforming. I mean that much is clear.
Yeah, so it's going to be a very interesting week. I thought one little thing with touch off the field is that World Rugby went huge fanfare, sent me the press release yesterday 4 times that they've engaged this company to protect their match officials from social media abuse. They apparently have got this AI system that they've now contracted, which will filter out messages that come through to there, and will and obviously using keywords and things like that in several different languages, try and pinpoint which are abusive messages, and then report them to the respective unions in the countries where they're from to try and stop this behavior, sort of like those fans coming to stadiums. It's a rather ambitious thing, given that millions and millions of people are going to be using social media. And I know it sounds like they want to do something, but I just think maybe it's a bit more lip service than anything else. No one condones that sort of behavior, but it just it sounds a bit ridiculous, to be very honest.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to police it. But it also sort of goes back to World Rugby maybe wanting to be seen doing the right thing. I mean, we see it also in now some of the law changes, especially around head injuries, where it's a very important topic, obviously, and you need to curb, head injuries or injuries to the spine and so on, and neck injuries. But if you listen to them carefully, it often sounds as if they're kind of doing it because, it is what people expect them to do. Because sometimes also within the system, it seems to break down. The message doesn't really filter down all the way. Sometimes the officials get it wrong. Sometimes the coaches get it wrong. So yeah, I agree with you that it sounds more like lip service.
I was going to say, Liam, we always talk wine on this podcast, and you have been now in France for, I suppose, almost 24 hours now. So have you had a glass of wine yet?
The short answer is no, because it has been, I've been here for now just over 24 hours, and it's boiling hot here. So I've had some beer to quench the thirst more than anything else. But even now, I mean, it's now well into the evening, and it's still balmy, and it's hot outside. It's humid. So if you're going to have wine, you probably need to think carefully about what you're going to go for. So it will probably have to be probably a white wine, maybe a Chenin Blanc, or even if you're bold enough, a Chardonnay.
Well, I was going to say, and then you can do that thing that will probably give horror faces to the French, which South Africans do quite a lot, and put ice in your wine.
Yeah, and actually what I neglected to say there, because this area is known for its rosés. I'm not a big rosé drinker, but the rosés here are exceptional. So that's, I'm spending a few weeks here, so I'm sure my opportunity will come.
Well, I think your homework, Liam, is by next week you should source a bottle of rosé for us, and so that you can tell us about it.
I shall do that, but also next week, towards the end of next week, I'll be in Bordeaux, where the dynamic will change dramatically, because then very much in red wine territory. So yeah, we'll looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, I think the it's going to change dramatically in a lot of ways for a lot of teams as well, and it's going to be quite interesting as well. But yeah, Liam, I know you haven't had much sleep since you've been there, and you've been running around in that. I think it's going to be a very interesting weekend. We're hoping everybody who's listening to this is going to enjoy the games, and wherever you watch it, have a responsible glass of something in your hand. And yeah, it's been great chatting to you. We're going to leave you with some quotes from the big Viking himself, RG Snyman, who told Liam and them today in the press conference some very interesting things about the music he listens to on the way to the game, and a couple more. Have a listen, and we'll see you guys next week after, and we'll have lots to talk about. There's going to be so much next week to talk about. We could easily do a 2-hour podcast, but yeah, enjoy the games, and we'll chat again next week.
So usually I like to listen to something that's a bit on the rougher side. So always like my Metallica and things like that. But more recently, I've really gotten into Mongolian throat singing. So if you go and listen to the Who band, it's a bunch of Mongolian guys, badass guys. They're similar haircuts, and they do this throat singing. It's traditional for them. So
you can't give us an example.
No, I'm trying. I'm learning. So maybe one of these days. But, yeah.
The coach going to the game. I mean, is that your pre-match?
But that's what I'll listen to. It's not in everyone's taste.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and a reminder, you can find all the To The Last Drop podcasts on the Brendan Nell YouTube channel, iono.fm, Spotify, Player.fm, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.